Hey, this is Rick Casalge, injury specialist from exercisesforinjuries.com. In today's video, I want to go through the 5 best hip pain exercises for the elderly. And I'll get Alex to go through the first one, and then I'll kind of explain in detail, and I'll also show you the other 4. Perfect. So it ends up being a quarter squat. So hands are out front in order to kind of balance yourself. Looking at the feet are about hip width apart. You're squatting down about a quarter of the ways, and what we end up working on is knee strength, and we end up working on hip strength. Looking at the sets, reps, time, and intensity that you want to end up doing, sets end up being 1, repetitions end up being 5, time ends up being smooth controlled movement, and then looking at the intensity, you want to end up challenging the muscles around the knee and the muscles around the hip. So that ends up being the first exercise to do. Now the second one ends up being a wall push-up. So Alex is going to go against the wall. She ends up having her hands just about shoulder width apart. She's at an angle. You can see that she's on her toes. And then she's going to end up going through that push-up movement. Good, coming towards the wall. Good, and then straightening out. And then again with the elbows, she doesn't want the elbows high. She probably has them, like at 45. Good. And back. Now with this one, it doesn't necessarily target the hip. Well, it does indirectly target the hip. With this, with your body being at an angle, we're working the core area. And then also with the pushing movement, we're challenging that core area more. And then it ends up being a good overall strengthening exercise, especially in the upper body or pushing movement. Looking at the sets, reps, time, and intensity that you're going to do this one with, once again, just like the other one, 1 set, repetitions end up being 5, time ends up being smooth controlled movement, and the intensity is you want to feel in your upper body, but also in your abdominal area and in your hip when it comes to stability, so muscles in the hip working. So that ends up being 2 down. Now going through the third one is kind of a continuation of the one before, which ends up being wall plank with leg kicks. So now you're on your forearms. Your forearms are at like 45-degree angle. You're at an angle. You're tightening up the abdominal area. You're on your toes and the balls of your feet. And then now you're going to bring the legs back out. Leg, good. And then alternating sides, good. And just alternating back and forth. And you're looking at bringing that leg back about 45 degrees. There shouldn't be much of a change in the curve in your low back. But with this one, what we end up working is the core, so the abdominal area. Also, we end up working the stability around the hip. So the muscles around the hip. When Alex moves one leg, that other leg has to stabilize. That hip needs to stabilize. All the muscles around that hip stabilize. So with this one, this ends up being great, strengthening the core, which ends up being important when it relates to hip pain, and then also working on the stability of the hip, which ends up helping when it relates to hip pain as well. Looking at sets, reps, time, and intensity, sets end up being 1, repetitions end up being 5, time ends up being a smooth controlled movement, and the intensity, you want to end up feeling it in your abdominal area and in the hip, meaning you want to feel the muscles working in that area. With this one, 5 repetitions total, not total, but 5 repetitions each side, so it'll end up being a total of 10 repetitions or 10 leg movements. Now moving on to the fourth one, bent over row with the pressing movement. Okay, good. So Alex is rowing and then pressing overhead. Excellent. So feet end up being about a hip width apart. You're bending in the knee. You're bringing the seat back. Your body ends up being at an angle. You're tightening the abdominal area. You're going to go through like a rowing movement as Alex is doing. Elbows just passing the body. And then you're moving into like a pressing movement. Good. And then back into that. So with this one, we're kind of in that quarter squat position. So we're working on strengthening the hip. We're working on tightening up that abdominal area. So we're strengthening that core in order to help with that hip pain. And then also with the rowing movement, we're working on that mid-back area. And then also with that pressing movement, we're working on challenging that core more. Good. Excellent, Alex. Thank you. So when it comes to sets, reps, time, and intensity, sets end up being 1, repetitions end up being 5, so 5 total movements. Intensity, you want to end up challenging your abdominal area, but also your mid-back and shoulder area. Looking at the time ends up being a smooth, controlled movement. Now looking at the last exercise, the 5th one, we're moving down to the floor bridge. So this one will depend on if you're able to get down, up and down from the floor easily. So one suggestion that I end up letting people know, or my clients know, is you might not be able to get on the floor easily, but you're able to get on and off your bed easier, so you can try to do it in bed, so lying on your back in bed. So if you look at Alex is lying back, hands are to the side, feet are about hip width apart, and then what she's going to do is push through her feet and then lift her seat up. And ideally you want the knee, hip, and shoulders in a straight line. If you're not able to do that, Alex will get you to come back down. You can just bring your seat about a hand width off the ground, so it ends up being like a low bridge. Perfect. Holding that for a couple seconds and then coming back down. And then back up, good, and back down. And then with this one, what we're working on is the hamstrings, glutes, core area. When it relates to hip pain, what we want to do is strengthen that core. That'll end up helping when it comes to hip pain, and then strengthening the hamstrings and the glutes, and that will also end up helping with the hip pain. Looking at the sets, reps, time, and intensity, sets end up being 1, repetitions end up being 5, time ends up being smooth, controlled movement with a good stop at the top position, 0, like about 1 second, and the intensity ends up being light, but you're really trying to target and feel the muscles in the hamstrings, glutes, and in the core working. Perfect, Alex. So there you go. That ends up being the 5 best hip pain exercises for the elderly. Now, if you want some of my other best tips and tricks when it relates to hip pain, then I recommend you click right here. I have a brand new free report called 5 Tricks That Fight Hip Pain and Tightness. Just click right here, let me know where to send that report, and I'll send you that report right away. Now, if you're watching this on a tablet or smartphone, head down below in the description, click the first link, which will end up being exercisesforinjuries.com/hips. Let me know where to send that report, and I'll send you that report right away. Now, if you have a question or comment for me, you can leave it down below in the comment section. If you got benefit from this video, make sure to like the video, and lastly, hit subscribe in order to get future pain relieving videos.